What you're about to see is my interpretation of life and times and the events after the rapture during the first 3 months of the tribulation. Wow, it's quite the dream. That one lasted all through the night, about 8 hours. Okay. See, I should have enough power in this little camera. Let's see. That fence behind me is new. I'm just coming back from the charging station. Got my battery unit recharged. Cost $80. And they only let me charge it for half an hour. They're not taking gold. They're not taking cash anymore. They're only taking gold and silver. So that's the only way you can spend money around here, unless of course you take the number. Which at the charging station they've got a whole. It looks like a little circus there. They've got everything. They've got a little promotion booth for the number. It's still voluntary at this point. The mark of the beast. And they're just taking the last of everybody's cash. You can get more service if you have gold or silver. And this fence here, that's new. They've just set that up. Well, I've never seen it before. Not in this park. This is the park. You can see the road in the distance over there. That leads to the big city here in Kingston. Everybody's starting to wake up now. There's movement in the house, but while the images are still fresh in my head, I'll take you through them. It's quite an amazing dream, the battle at Armageddon. It's not quite what I expected. The back of my mind, I was expecting something like Hollywood, where there's two opposing forces and they clash together. But it's not like that at all. It was totally different. Okay, the dream started off again, looking at those 4 blocks. The 4th block, it painted itself to look like that shot or that scene or the picture between the Valley of Armageddon, where all the soldiers were gathered in the One World Army, and the Light Road, where all the heavenly soldiers are, the heavenly warriors are. But that fence is all new. I don't know what they're going to be doing with that. I suspect, I hear rumors that they're going to be cleaning out this town, shipping everybody out, and using this as a re-education center maybe. But we'll see what happens. What day is it? I think it's about day 63 since the rapture happened. So just over 2 months. And they're not. I haven't heard anything about them restoring power to the entire town. So I don't know if that's going to happen or what. So they have those charging stations to recharge your power and whatnot. But I've noticed that hold on, I see some security down there, some police. So I'll head the other way for a little while. I don't feel like being hassled right now. I'll walk by them in a sec. And anyway, it started off. I was floating above the whole thing. I could see the 7 groups of people and angels. And the number in total, I don't know exactly, but I get the impression it's somewhere between 70,000 and 700,000, which I thought was a very small number, since there are about 200 million soldiers in the field of Armageddon. But when the battle was happening, I understood why the Lord had such a low number, because he basically didn't need to match number for number, soldier for soldier. Anyhow, at the charging stations, they have, it's like a little circus there. They've got tents and kiosks, all promoting the new way of living here now. Now that we're deep inside the tribulation and the one-worlders have taken over, they're slowly transferring the money system over. The military cops are all around. The mill cops, as they're known, the military police. They're all around the place, and yeah, they put up this fence. But the one thing that I did notice, I'm gonna take a shortcut this way. The one thing that I did notice is that they're really starting to push not only the number, but they're starting to push a new sexuality. Hold on a sec. I wrote it down. Let me see. Because they've got one tent there. Where did I put it? They've got one tent there with banners everywhere with all these slogans. Let's see. The biggest one there says, "Join the free sex evolution." And there's smaller ones. These sound bites are little placards that say, "Hook into the net for free sex." And the other one, the more popular one, is "Be a free sex hooker." Now, you probably don't know what all that means, because if you're listening to this, if you're watching this, then you're probably one of the dissidents that are trying to run away from the one world system. And if you're not a Christian, or if you're not a believer, then I'm afraid there's only one route for you to go. I hope that you'll accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, but that means in order to get into heaven, to get eternal life, you're going to have to lay down your life. Put yourself into captivity, or allow yourself to go into captivity, and eventually have your head chopped off. That's the only way. But so out of the billions of people in heaven, there's just a very small portion that were allowed to be, or recruited, or were asked to be inside the Lord's warriors that were going down to the battle. But anyway, so the whole thing started off with Jesus. He's there at the end of the light road, the road of light, which extends from heaven across the universe and just touches the atmosphere of the earth. So I could see the earth in its fullness, and I could see below, I could see the African continent, I could see the Asian continent, and I could see that the road was pointing directly towards the Middle East, specifically Israel. If you're a non-believer, but just a plain old dissident that wants nothing to do with this New World Order, well, then you're watching this. And since you're on the outside of society, you probably have no idea what all that means in terms of free sex. I was talking to one of the guards, and I overheard a couple of other guards too. What that's all about is, there was never ever a gay agenda. A lot of believers before the rapture, and a lot of other people too, were accusing the world system of promoting a gay agenda. But I overheard one of the guards talking, and there was never a gay agenda. It was a UNISEX mandate. Ever since TV came about, they started introducing the thoughts and ideas of men dressed as women in women's clothing and women dressed in men's clothing. And over the decades, what they did slowly is they created a unisex culture. The term free sex, it means one gender. It's forbidden now for anyone to use the terms male or female. From here on in the New World Order, there's no such thing as male or female, men or women. Everybody is just one gender, and that's free sex. I'm a free sex, they're a free sex, everyone's a free sex. Which just means it doesn't matter who you have sex with. Men, women, men with men, women with women, even animals too, believe it or not. So, the term be a hooker for free sex. The term hook is being used to speak of and promote the mark of the beast, the number by which you can buy and sell things and get your ID and get your medical history and everything. That's called hooking in. Hooking into the network, which is what they call the World Wide Web now. So, if you're going to get hooked into the net for free sex, that's basically what it means. As I was leaving, I saw one of the alien helpers, and he was really pushing the whole evolution thing. And you could see in the atmosphere, you could still see clouds, and you could still see burning smoke and patches of burning clouds and darkened clouds everywhere. But when Jesus started, all he did was he just held up two hands and then pointed to the ground. And then from behind everyone, coming out of heaven's front doors, there were two horses. Two horses came riding out with two riders on them. And they each held these invisible kind of chains. They're the kind of chains, not the kind of chains that we have here on Earth with the same kind of links, but these links were different. They were in such a way that they looked invisible, but when they moved, they reflected light, and the links were in such a way that the chains looked more like ropes than anything else. But you could tell they were designed to bound something really, really strong, and to keep it from keep whatever was bound from escaping or breaking the chain. But anyway, these two figures on their horses came flying by, and they landed right beside Jesus. And I asked my angel guide, "Who are those?" And then he just simply said, "Michael and Gabriel." So the archangel Michael was there, and the messenger Gabriel was there too. And then Jesus looked at both of them in the eyes, and he said something in a language they understood. And then they both sped off. They left the road of light and headed down to the planet Earth towards Israel. And then Jesus he lifted up another hand, and then a third angel came from heaven's front door. And this one was a little bit bigger, and the chain that he held was a little bit wider too, but it was still made out of the same stuff. And he didn't stop beside Jesus. He just rushed right on past, following Michael and Gabriel. And then in the spirit realm, I was pulled towards them, just pushed off, and I must have been going almost 1,000 miles an hour. If my body were prone to the forces of nature, the laws of nature that on Earth, my face would have been pulled back. I would have felt the friction of the atmosphere. But instead, I just felt the acceleration of the speed as I passed the third angel, and I caught up to Michael and Gabriel, and I was just flying right behind them, just watching what they were doing. And we got closer to the Earth, and then we got closer to the Middle East, and then we got closer to Israel, and then we got closer to to Jerusalem itself, and then I could see the walled city in Jerusalem, and we flew down to the middle of that, and we landed right in the courtyard of the third temple there. And Michael and Gabriel got off their horses, and they just casually strolled up to the temple. I could see that they gave it kind of a nod out of respect for God, because it was God's house. Basically, it had just been taken over by the Antichrist and the false prophet. And there were guards there on the outside, and the guards tried shooting them, but the bullets just passed through. I mean, it was like nothing. Man's weapon have absolutely no effect on heavenly matter and heavenly beings. So Michael and Gabriel, they just made a little gesture, and the guards fell down. They were just immediately rendered unconscious. And they nodded at the door, and the door itself opened all by itself. And as they walked through, again, more guards came and tried to stop them, but they just gave a little wave, and those guards were knocked unconscious too. And then they went into the throne room, and again, more guards, but they were rendered unconscious. And then I could see terror and fear in the eyes of the two people that were there by the throne. One was the beast, and one was the false prophet. And they were both scared out of their wits. They had no idea that the power that they were dealing with. They thought the power of Satan was great, but it's useless. On a scale of 1 to 10, Satan is a 1, and the angels are a 10 plus. And on the same scale, God's power is infinite. It just goes on. It can't even be measured. But anyway, Michael and Gabriel, they just grabbed each of the people, each with one hand. Michael grabbed the beast, lifted him up in the air, and Gabriel grabbed the false prophet and lifted him up in the air. And then they just kind of moved the rope around, and then the rope itself wrapped itself around, and it bound them tight. And I thought that was it. They would be taken off, but Michael and Gabriel just stood beside the bound beast and the bound false prophet, and they waited for the third angel. And the third angel came into the temple. He was much larger, about a 15-footer. And then he just he took the beast by the scruff of the neck and just lifted him up, and then he plunged his hand into the chest of the beast. But he didn't break the skin. He didn't go into it. He didn't draw blood or anything. He just plunged his fist into the chest in a spiritual sense. And then he ripped out Satan, because the beast at that point had been possessed by Satan. So when this angel ripped Satan out of there, the beast became the Antichrist again, because he had two souls. It was the human soul of the Antichrist was left in the body and was left without Satan. And Satan was there just being held up by this one angel who took his chain and he just wrapped it around him. And then, it was only then that Michael and Gabriel took the false prophet by the back of the neck, and then they just flew off into this kind of circle of light, this glow of light. They went into another dimension somewhere. And I asked the angel where they were going, and he said they're going to be thrown into the lake of fire, just as they are. They've already been judged. And then the other angel, he took Satan, and then he flew off somewhere. And I said, is he going to the lake of fire too? And the angel said, no, he will be thrown in the abyss, but not just yet. He must be put on display first. I didn't understand that, but I figured I would in time. And then all of a sudden, from that point, I was whisked back up to the road of light instantly, in like 2 seconds. How mankind now, since they're taking credit for the rapture, those aliens, they're taking credit for the rapture. They're selling, or they're telling everybody that it was their companions that removed all the Christians and all the troublemakers from the world. They're telling everybody that they removed the Christian troublemakers because they were preventing the world from evolving to the next stage. And the next stage for human evolution in the New World Order, in the Tribulation, is everybody is going to become one gender. Everybody's going to become a free sexer. And in order to make the big evolutionary step, you got to take an electronic chip inside your hand, or you take that tattoo. They've got a flexible tattoo with electronic ink, metallic ink in it, and it sticks in your forehead. A lot of them are flesh colored, depending on what color skin you have. So it can blend in. Most of the times you don't see that tattoo thing on their forehead. Some people have become allergic to the chip in the hand. It's caused a lot of side effects in some people. So they developed that tattoo unit. And so those other ones take that one. So a free sexer is anyone that has the number and they don't care about what kind of partner they have, what kind of partner they have sex with. Hence the phrase, free sex for hookers, become a hooker for free sex, hook into the net, and all those other phrases. And they've really pushed this UNISEX mandate on everyone. Anyway. And then I could see Jesus making ready to lead the troops down onto the earth. And he just leaned over to his horse, gave the horse a brush on the neck, and he whispered something into his ears. And the horse just started a nice little trot. And they stepped off the road of light and onto the atmosphere of the earth. And with every step the horse made on the atmosphere, he made sparks, and those sparks left trails of fire. And with every step he just got faster and faster and faster. And then all the armies of heaven followed behind. And they too followed at the same pace. At first they were just walking, and then they started to run, and everybody was just kind of rushing down there, about 200-300 miles an hour, not extremely fast, but fast. And then all of a sudden I was transported back down onto the surface of the planet amongst the soldiers again, and I could see the horses that were used for ceremonial purposes, the horses that the generals and the commanders and the captains and the lieutenants were riding on. They had been convinced that they were going to be heroes of the Battle of Armageddon. They were convinced by the one-worlders, by Satan and by the beast and by the captains of industry that those soldiers, those generals were going to be heroes when they win the Battle of Armageddon. But it was not to be. Anyway, the horses, they could sense what was going on, and they started to panic. So they threw off their riders, and they just bolted out of the field as far as they could. They trampled over the soldiers. They trampled over everything, because in their own horsely nature, they knew that the Creator was coming, and they knew there was a battle about to happen. So the horses just left trampling the soldiers as much as they could, just to get out of the way. Looks like a little roadblock up ahead. I'm going to have to talk to the mill cops. I gotta hide so they don't see me with this camera. At the charging station, I was going to charge the cell phones that we had, but they were confiscated. They said everybody who gets a number will be assigned a new communication device. So they confiscated it, but I managed to hide and keep my little cameras. These are what I use, and I have the exact same kind that I'm holding here. I can charge them up at home, but they got a nice little camera. So these will probably be lying around, or if you're watching this, then you've probably found it. It's probably in my house somewhere, or I've hidden it with a note, or I don't know what's going to happen. But eventually, I and my family and everybody else left behind, and we're going to be removed. We'll be taken out of the house and either killed on site or taken to one of the camps, where we will be rounded up and put in a special camp where we will be beheaded. And then it must have been about 10 miles or so up in the air when Jesus slowed down the pace of everything. His horse went from a nice fast gallop to just a casual trot, and everybody else slowed down too. And I could hear Jesus say something like, "Okay, let them make the first volley," or "let the first volley begin," something like that, words to that effect. And that was when all the soldiers and everybody that had missiles or rockets that could be launched in the air, all the planes took off towards them, all the helicopters took off towards them. And as they drew closer to Jesus and the army, they fired off their rockets and they fired off their missiles. And they were just and they hit their targets. All these bombs, all these missiles, they actually exploded on Jesus and the soldiers and everything. And there was explosions everywhere, and the whole sky was just lit up with fire and black smoke and explosions, just thousands and thousands of explosions. But Jesus and the heavenly warriors just walked straight through, as if those explosions were nothing more than just a fog bank, just a puff of smoke. The weapons and explosions of man, they have absolutely no effect on heavenly matter, on heavenly substance, on heavenly beings. So they just walked straight through, getting ever closer to the earth. And that was when I could see that the soldiers were starting to panic too, because they then realized that those weapons had absolutely no effect on the Lord's army that was coming down. And so some of them panicked really, really fiercely, and they were just shooting their own men, and they were just shooting their own soldiers just to get away from the whole battle. So many people panicked, and so many people just tried escaping. What they knew was the wrath of God coming down. So anyway, as we get closer, okay, I'm going to put the camera away so they don't see it and confiscate it. Okay, so that's it. Unisex culture, Mark the Beast, evolving to the next humanary level. Aliens, which are actually demons, are taking credit for the Rapture. Okay, getting closer. Okay, thanks. May Jesus have mercy on your soul. That's it. But some of the soldiers, they stayed there bravely and they firing as much as they could. And that was when Jesus made some kind of hand signal, and it divided up all the warriors into three groups. So all the angels were divided up into three groups. All the redeemed were divided up into three groups, except for those 30-foot soldiers, the ones with a single spear. They stayed as a group themselves. And I wondered what the three groups were for until they got closer to the ground. And then 1/3 of the angels and the redeemed, they all landed as foot soldiers. And then then the other third of the angels, they all went after the flying vehicles in the air, the helicopters, the planes, and whatnot. And then the other third of the angels and redeemed, they just stayed floating in the air for waiting for something. And then it wasn't until I saw the battle on the ground, what was going on. And again, it wasn't like a clash where everybody comes together and there's a skirmish and everybody's fighting for their lives to prove how tough they are. The warriors of God, they didn't have to prove how tough they knew they were going to win. So they didn't have to rush. They didn't have to do anything. It wasn't a hack and slash battle with stabbing and everything. It wasn't a violent thing at all. When they wielded their weapons, their swords or their spears, or they fired their arrows of various kinds, it was done with a sense of empathy and sympathy, because they felt bad that these human beings had bowed to Satan, that they accepted the number of the beast, that their souls were lost, that these were just evil and wicked people. But they were still children of God. They still had souls. And they still felt bad for them, as wicked and as perverse as they were. So when the warriors of God were attacking the one world soldiers, again, all they had to do was just take a little slice, and it didn't matter whether the soldiers got a flesh wound or whether they were totally stabbed all the way through. What would happen is the physical body would just fall straight down, and you could see the soul of the person just rise up out of the air till about 15 or 20 feet, and then it would just stay there bound. The soul would just stay there, and it couldn't move anywhere. And that was when those the 1/3 of the warriors that were just hovering in the air, that was when it was their turn to do something. So they all waited until there was a certain number of souls collected together, and they would just herd them all together, and they would take them off towards the mountain. And they were taking them towards another group of angels that were going to lead them to Hades. Those souls went straight to Hades. As soon as the souls left the bodies, they went to Hades. But the other soldiers, the really defiant ones, the really strong ones that kept trying to fight the Lord and his army, when their bodies were struck with a weapon, the human soul also raised up, but there was also a demon spirit inside of them, and the demon spirit would just take off in one direction or the other, and that was when the angels would chase off after them. And that other group of angels, the 30-footers with the spear, they were sent off to hunt down and capture the Nephilim, because the Nephilim were there as well in the Valley of Armageddon, but they were all in the mountains. They were all watching to see what was going to happen, to see what they were up against. And when they saw that the power of God and the armies of God were just too powerful for the armies of men, they just all took off, and they just ran away. So the bigger ones with the spears, they went to hunt them down wherever they were on the earth, to track everyone down. And then Jesus, as he was riding through, he was just riding over top of the armies, over top of the Valley of Armageddon. And every time he spoke a command, the sound wave that came out of his mouth was shaped invisibly like a sword. And then that sword, when he finished talking, would send out a shockwave. And that shockwave would send out commands to whoever. So every time he spoke, it was like the sword came out, and it would spread out to whomever he was commanding, and they would do whatever was being commanded. Whether it was collecting souls, whether it was striking down the one world armies, whether it was going after helicopters or stopping missiles and stuff like that. Because there was a last resort. There were two more attacks made by the enemy, by the generals and the CEOs and the world leaders. They were off somewhere in their underground shelters watching on TV monitors, so they were cowardly hiding far from the battlefield. But they must have sent off nukes and this other kind of bomb, because there was a bomb there that when it exploded, several bombs, when they exploded, would create this green, yellow, murky kind of gas. And it was hoped that gas would affect the heavenly soldiers, the heavenly warriors, but it didn't. Again, they just passed through. No weapon formed against man could prosper against God and his power. But when that gas fell on one section of the soldiers, it must have had some kind of chemical, because when they breathed it in, their tongues would swell up and their eyes would swell up and they would start to bleed. They'd bleed from their mouth. Basically, their insides just burst out through their heads, and it was just awful to see. But that's a man's weapon. They're so destructive and cruel. And they must have also sent out some nukes too, because when I was pulling back from the dream, or when I was pulling back in the dream from the battlefield, I could see these much larger missiles, and they were all heading towards Israel. But there was another group of angels, the ones that were looking after the airplanes and flying vehicles. A lot of them, the horses that had two sets of wings, the really fast ones, they would fly right next to these missiles, and the angels would just chop off the tail simply with one of their flaming swords or one of their lightning swords or whatever sword they have, would chop off the tail, and they would just take hold of the radioactive nuclear warhead, and they just carried it off somewhere on the earth to be properly disposed of, or somewhere that the Lord told them. So nuclear missiles had absolutely no effect, and I could say that because I saw one of them explode. And I know there were several of them exploding here and there, but I saw one specifically explode, and there was a group of about 7 or 8 angels that kind of encircled the explosion, and they were just going faster and faster and faster until the explosion was contained, and it was subdued into this just glowing ball that looked like the sun. And then one of the angels would just pick it up and then just carry it off to where all the other nuclear missiles were being disposed of. And then after a while, I don't know how long it took to cut down all the soldiers and remove their souls and send them to Hades. It must have been hours, but in the dream it seemed like minutes. And then all of a sudden I could see the sun starting to rise up over the horizon, and it looked like there was an angel standing on the sun itself. And that was really weird. And then he put out his hands and he said something in a language that I'd never heard of, or I'd never heard before. It wasn't a heavenly language, it wasn't a human language, an earthly language. He just said something, and then the dream ended. So that was it. And the whole battle was just, it wasn't frantic, but there was a lot going on there. And it wasn't cruel, it wasn't mean or anything. The only real violence that happened was when the one world soldiers were killing themselves and panicking and trying to get away. But as far as the armies of the Lord were concerned, the heavenly warriors, they were just carrying out a duty, and that was just getting rid of the evil and the sin that was left on the planet, the evil and the sin that was not going to be a part of the new earth that is about to take place. So that's that. I look forward to the next dream to see what happens with that angel on the sun. Anyway, that's it for now. If you make it to the end of the 7 years of tribulation, whoever you are watching this, just call upon the name of the Lord Jesus and you will be saved.